You know, and what I found out through growing up, that unity has become fragile in our communities. You know, and back to what he was saying, you know, black men have always been stereotyped. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like, I agree with you, you know what I mean? Nowadays, you know, you could almost be who you want to be. Mm-hmm. You know, and that's the best way to be. Now, when you try to put on this persona, that's what you call assimilation. Mm-hmm. When I dress like I'm supposed to dress, then that's like assimilating. You know what I mean? Like if I go to court, it's better for me to appear in front of a judge, not dressed like this, but I have to put a suit and tie because the lawyer has a suit and tie. You know, so that you know, in certain situations, that makes things it gives things a little bit more clarity. I'm not if I'm facing time, I'm not gonna go in there looking like I looked on the corner. Right. You know, I'm gonna put a suit and tie on because who's ever representing me is gonna have a suit and tie. Now sometimes presentation can sometimes, you know, be a factor. You know, but in terms of nowadays, you know, and this is what I say about young people now. Nowadays, you can create your own wealth. Nowadays, you can come up with any type of idea and present it. You know, because you have the internet that you can market. You know, if somebody don't like you in Baltimore, you might have 2,000 people that like you in another city. Sure. You know, and I'll give you a good example. Most of your viewers are not going to come here from Baltimore. Most of y'all viewers are not going to come here from Baltimore. Y'all going to reach a platform of people that are outside of the city that you're in. Right. Most of your support is going to come from people that are not here. And it should be that way, but when you're doing things like this, your platform will reach more people. You know, most of the people that will probably be on your platform are not going to be people that are originally from Baltimore. They're going to be people in Tennessee. They're going to be people in North Carolina. They're going to be people in different cities, you know, that can identify. And first thing they're going to say is, oh, wow, the same thing they doing, or the same thing that them brothers are elaborating on, I see the same thing.
Yeah, I feel the same.
And that's how that's how this thing blossoms. You know, you may get a guy that has a #1 podcast or a #1 talk show, but most of his audience are not the people that are surrounding him. His audience reaches over, and that's just a vibration.
Do you think that you're conditioned to think that the way that you think as a black man? You're conditioned? Do you think that you're conditioned to think the way that you think? Like you said, you walk into the bank with your pants saying whatever. Well, no, you had your dreads, you know, everybody, you know. Yeah. So do you feel that you're conditioned to think like that? Like, do you think that was almost kind of like the black man is scary, so he needs to appear like this or he needs to appear like that? Do you think that you're conditioned to do it or not?
Well, you know, when he was elaborating on that, what makes people stereotype is the trauma that we are associated with in our community. Like you got post-stress trauma disorder. You know, a lot of people have anxiety, you know, through certain trauma. Like I just found out that you have trauma and you have compound trauma. I was traumatized as a young man. You know, I was molested as a child. You know what I mean? And that was traumatic. And to be honest with you, that was a secret that I kept for 30-something years. I never, and it happened.
It's a heavy secret.
Yeah. But I'm gonna tell you something with you. It happened in the projects, the Lafayette projects where I grew up in. But you know, as a child, you know, you being not having a father, you know, you felt like, you know, I'm the oldest of 3. I felt like I was a man in the house, and I can remember vaguely how it happened. You know, my mother told me to go to the store, and you know, when I was in the projects, we used to play in abandoned cars. You know, we get in an abandoned car, and we had to be driving. Or when a man was driving the car, and I'm sitting in the front seat, I always watched the method, the pedal, the blinker. You know what I mean? I was learning. And what happened was I was going to the store, and this man had his hood up. Now, I'm supposed to be going to the store for my mother. And he said, look, man, I need you to start the truck up. I didn't know him. But, you know, I thought I was grown. I know how to start a truck up. I watched my grandfather and father turn the key. And when I started the truck up, he closed the hood. And he took me under the viaduct right on Gay Street. I can remember like it was yesterday. And he kept me there for hours and molested me. Now, mind you, when I got back, when he dropped me off in the projects, I had everybody in the community like, boy, where you been? Your mother gonna whip your ass.
How old were you?
I was about 8 years old. And I couldn't tell my mother what happened. You know what I mean? Because I had already violated. I never made it to the store. and I had the whole neighborhood looking for me. Where is he at? So by the time the guy dropped me off, and I got back there, you know, I had everybody screaming out, man, your mama gonna whip your ass. Where you been at? They been looking all over for you. They was great, call the police.
So what happened when you got in the house?
So when I got in the house, I went to bed, right? I went to bed. The only thing I remember when that man was doing what he was doing to me, I just looked up at the sky and said, God, just don't let him kill me. Next day I go to Catholic school. I'm sitting in a chair. You know, back then we had the wooden chairs, and I couldn't, you know, I couldn't sit there. But I didn't want to tell my mother. And I'm gonna tell you the reason why I didn't want to tell my mother. Because I didn't want the police there. I didn't want little kids to say, oh, that's Derek on the 6th floor who got raped. You know, because as a child, you understand that certain things are embarrassing. You know what I mean? It's like when I saw a guy that I hung out with and his father was pissy drunk laying in the elevator, that's embarrassing. You know what I mean? So I understood that. Now for 37 years, I act like it never happened. It never made me gravitate towards doing it to somebody else. It never took me away from dealing with women. You know, it was just something that, you know, I played sports. You know, my life just went on. You know, it wasn't traumatic. But what happened was, I knew that when I got heavy into drugs and I started going to 12-step programs, and I started hearing women, I started hearing men raising their hand, talking about their experience, so I took a risk. And in front of a crowd, and I told them. I felt a lot better. You know what I mean? I felt a lot better. And I had to realize that through trauma, you know what I mean? Sometimes trauma could led me into my addiction a lot longer. Not knowing that now I was a guy that sold drugs and then I wound up being a consumer. You know what I mean? You know, but when you out there having fun and you hanging in the bars and the nightclubs and everything, you don't think about 8 years old. Matter of fact, it was like selective amnesia. You know what I mean? But once I was able to get into a 12-step program and talk about it openly, like I'm talking about it now, and it's sad because when I hear stories about people that have had that same experience, I can identify, you know, with that. You know what I mean? But it never altered me to be either this way. You can get with this or you can get with that. You know, I still wanted to be a man. Not just a man, but a gentleman. See, I was talking to him earlier, it's different between a man and a gentleman. You know, a gentleman is more different. Anybody can be a man. You can be a man at 12. You know what I mean? Because you bring in the food, you doing this. But to be a gentleman, it takes certain levels and degrees and certain practices, certain mistakes, certain lessons. You know what I mean? I was married once, and I pride myself as being a good husband. I was a good provider. You know what I mean? We never wanted for nothing because I had the opportunity to be something that I didn't have an example. So I put a lot of effort in that. You know what I mean? I put a lot of effort in that. You know, until me and my wife, you know, we got caught up on drugs. You know, we split, but you know, she died, rest in peace. But I was able to raise her son. He was 2 years old, so I was a good example, good provider, because I didn't have a father there. My father was a womanizer. My father had like 14 kids by maybe 6 different women, and he was a real womanizer. And for one reason, I could never understand why me and my mother at an adolescent age, where she wouldn't let me have girls in the house. You know, I thought that was like abnormal. You know, what you mean I can't have nobody in the house? What you mean? I don't want no girls in my house when I'm not here. But I couldn't understand why she did that. But as I got older, I understood. Because she didn't want us to be like my father. My father was strictly a ladies' man. I mean, women were drawn to him. You know what I mean? And I looked just like him. And we always had that type of personality where we can communicate. That was some of his traits. Now, in terms of infidelity, yeah, I had my bout with being infidel, you know, dealing with infidelity. You know what I mean? And you know, but I'm more sensitive. I don't like hurting women. And usually, a lot of times when I get engaged into a relationship, it's like I come into a relationship and I see things and I want to help and contribute. But a lot of times I get in relationships, I find that in my younger years, they were more into me than I was into them. And I know women are more emotional, and I don't want to hurt nobody's feelings. So what I would do, instead of running with it, like the average Joe would, you know what I mean, and disappoint them, you know, I would kind of like back up out of it. You know what I mean? Because I know the disappointment. My mother was married 3 times, and she's successful. And the only thing about a black woman that I know of is that the only thing missing, besides the house, the degree, you know, is the male, the man, or the gentleman. You know what I mean? So I know how important it is, you know what I mean? Up to the day I'm still single, you know, because I do have insecurities, you know what I mean? Because black women are so demanding now. Very demanding. you know, because they have a voice and they are on levels. You know what I mean? So a lot of stuff that we could get away with now, we can't get away with it now.
Right.
And they're going to call you out. He made a good point. You walking on eggshells. You crack one, it's a problem.
Right. Rel, so how do you feel about trauma?
It's something that is like deeply concerning to me in our community, for real. I think we all walking around with traumas, mental illnesses that haven't been diagnosed. And I also think that medication isn't the only prescribed or doctor medication is not the only treatment. You know, like one thing that blew me away when I first came home is how many like MET programs, a boxing program, like it's like set up shop. It's like, man, and it's lines out the door, and these people have addictions and mental illnesses all in a trifecta, you know what I'm saying, like all in one. So it's like trauma is something really big that our community is not, that we don't go see therapists. Like I'm gonna tell you, I'm gonna be honest with y'all, I started seeing a therapist.
We all do.
I
like, everybody in my house sees a therapist.
Yeah, and tell you the truth, before I came to Baltimore, I met more people in Baltimore with therapists than I ever met that's black in any other city, because we like where I'm from, you know what I'm saying, like therapists, like nigga, we gonna deal with this shit and we gonna get through this shit. We gonna smoke one, we gonna drink good, you know what I'm saying, and we gonna get this money. You feel me? Fuck all that crying about shit, or we'll fuck around, cry to our men. You know what I'm saying? I'm gonna cry to my man about it, and then go home and not address the situation or seek help from a therapist or whatnot, you know? So trauma is something really big. You know, we all have traumas. You know, one of my relationships has been so tough, right, still to this very day, because of traumas from the past.